Take it away.
All right, Kip, thank you. And, I appreciate how you build it up and get everybody excited and then say, we're going to give an organizational update. So anyway, nothing like setting me up to crash and burn here. No, we'll do our best to make it fun. And by the way, I'm enjoying seeing the chats coming in. I like to see the interaction. It means we're having fun. Mark, I'm already seeing references to Tran, which I think you made the most famous buck in North America over the last couple of years. So I'm sure you'll get some questions about that. But that's great. So let me just give you a few organizational updates here, things that are going on at your National Deer Association. And so there are a lot of things going on here. I'll try to speed through them. We're nearly completed with the 2021 Deer Report, which was previously known as the Whitetail Report. And that's going to be published in January. That's one of the bigger projects we do during the year. And Matt and Kip in particular here, as you can see, those two fellows work exceptionally hard on that, as do some of the other team. But look forward to that coming out soon. We just completed a video project that we're working on with the Pennsylvania Game Commission and the University of Pennsylvania, at least a draft video of it's related to targeted removal for dealing with chronic wasting disease. So that'll be hitting the airwaves here soon, hopefully within the next few weeks. Reminder, we've been talking about the Southeast Deer Study Group meeting, which we're hosting this year. It's really unique for us to be able to host this. Registration opens tomorrow. And so because this is virtual, it really, for a lot of people, will be a great opportunity for the first time to be part of this thing and to see some of the most current and exciting research that's going on with deer right now in the country. So please, we'll remind you again, but be sure to check that out and register and take advantage of that opportunity of having it virtual this year. We are working on a significant project to raise awareness about deer, and we're focused right now in the southeastern part of the United States through a project we call the Southeast Deer Partnership. Now, this is a project that we do intend to spread nationwide. So this is a bit of a pilot, but we have 6 states have also signed on to financially support this project in addition to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And the main goal here is to increase awareness about deer. And so you'd probably be surprised to know how little the general public in particular knows about deer, and even some hunters, how little they know about deer. Now, if you're watching this show, chances are you're probably closer to the expert level. But I know I often get a kick out of looking at a magazine article or a newspaper article that's about deer, and they inevitably put a picture of a red deer or even an elk sometimes there. So people just don't have the awareness. And so part of this project is getting awareness out there about how great deer are, how important they are to conservation. And they're far more than something we try to avoid with our vehicles or that we shoot at. And they just bring a ton of value. And so that's what that project's all about. On the policy front, we're working on issues in a lot of different places across the country. New York, Michigan, Oklahoma, Maryland, Utah, and Arkansas, just to name a few. And we continue to work on chronic wasting disease in several states as well, even states that don't have it, which is really good. That means we're being proactive and we're trying to keep the disease out. So that's refreshing. An interesting one I want to point out that we're working on in New York has to do with hunting hours. And so some of you will probably be surprised to know that New York is the only remaining state in the country that doesn't allow legal shooting 1/2 hour before sunrise and 1/2 hour after sunset. That's been, for most of us, that's just been common. That's what you've always done. Well, in New York, they don't have that. And so we've had some success, I think, moving that forward. And there's a real good chance that I think we're going to get our hunters some additional time in New York. So stay tuned on that one. This week, we have a board of directors meeting on Wednesday. We're going to be electing officers at that meeting on our board, adopting our strategic plan that we've talked about in previous Beer and Deer webinars, approving our 2021 budget, among a number of other things. So I just want to mention that to say this is another big step forward for the National Deer Association since our merger. We have a really big announcement as well that our guest Mark Kenyon will be making at the end of his talk tonight. So stick around for that, in addition to winning the prize, hopefully. And I want to remind you too, as we're getting down to the wire, literally here for our Christmas shopping, and especially those of us that have been in the deer woods probably longer than we should be and neglecting our duties. It's never a bad idea to do things like buy memberships for people who you need that last minute gift idea for. So a membership to the National Deer Association I think would be a really good idea if you have some friends and some fellow hunters that may be interested in that. And we're still running a special through December 31st. You get $10 off a regular membership, and you get 3 years for 70, which is a pretty good deal. So take advantage of that. And I just want to say, on behalf of the entire NDA team and our board of directors, I want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We appreciate your support very, very much, and especially in what has been a really trying and difficult year. But we've made it through, and I think we've made it through well, but we couldn't have done that with all of your support. And we are really looking forward to having a much more normal 2021 so that we can really show you what we're made of and where we're headed as an organization. So with that, the boring executive guy will shut up, and we'll bring in the cool guys that'll tell the fun stories. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Nick, for that. That was good. It was boring, but it's important to talk about some of those things, especially from New York's perspective, because I would love to be able to hunt those extra 60 minutes a day. But so my duty next is to introduce our speaker. We've talked about Mark in the past. I've known Mark a long time. Mark, I went digging today. I'm not going to show her, but I went digging for photos from when we may have first met. You attended a 2011 Deer Steward class at which was formerly QDMA's Deer Steward class. It was a level 1 class in Missouri at Dr. Grant Woods' place, and I actually found some pictures from that, but it was nothing too flattering, so I'm not going to put them up on the screen. But known you a long time. You are a stellar storyteller and have been for over a decade. I've enjoyed incredibly, following the stories that you put together. Nick just mentioned a few minutes ago about a buck named Tran. I don't know if he's the most famous buck you've ever pursued, but potentially. I know a lot of people on here follow you for those reasons. You tell the highs, you tell the lows. And it's just really exciting to see kind of the truth and what really happens when you're trying to pursue something like deer hunting. I think you've really been very honest with your storytelling. The high accolades is he is the author of That Wild Country, critically acclaimed book. I enjoyed reading it. I know many people have enjoyed reading it, and hopefully a new person will have a copy of this book and will enjoy reading it as well. He's the founder and host of the Wired to Hunt podcast. Took a leap of faith over a decade ago, I'm guessing at this point, where you left a different job and started this thing called Wired to Hunt, and have hundreds of thousands of people that follow what you do. And certainly you're a contributor and major player and team member to the MeatEater Inc. Company. And one of the big announcements we'll be talking about here tonight has to do with that. But I don't want to take too much more of your time, Mark. I'm excited to watch this unfold. We had initially tried to get you to our Whitetail Weekend in March. The talk I gave earlier this year on the webinar that's got so many views was also originally given at that, but COVID prevented you from coming. I'm guessing that this talk is going to be as popular, if not more, and then some. And I want to learn what you've learned. So the floor is yours. You can share your screen, and then towards the end, we're going to open it up for questions.
Well, thank you, Matt. And you didn't you didn't include the best accolade I ever got, which came from you many years ago. And I like to remind myself of this often whenever my head gets too big. You once told me that I cornered the market on failure. And that one rang true.
I remember that conversation.
yeah, that was pretty good. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I'm excited to be able to share some stories and a few lessons learned, and drink some local Michigan beer. I'll definitely be participating in the beers and deer part. But what I want to do is kind of quickly and at a high level walk through some, I don't want to call them epiphanies, but lessons I've learned, things I've been reminded of over the past 2 years while working on a project. But I want to kind of go through that quickly to set a foundation, at least for a conversation that I hope that we can all have afterwards. I'm most excited about answering questions and talking about this thing, because this project that we're going to jump into, the Back 40, was always supposed to be a stand-in for everybody. The whole idea around even the title of the show confused people sometimes, because they said, well, this farm that I'm going to tell you guys about, it's 64 acres. Why do you call it the Back 40? And the reason was because, the back 40 is a kind of a common ubiquitous term for what, everybody's piece of ground, everyone's piece of land that they have. And we wanted this project and this property to be representative of what anybody could have. And so really, I bring all that up because I want everybody to be able to be a part of this conversation and to take something away from it. And probably the best way to do that is to hear what you guys actually want to know, what you're actually interested in, because so much of this stuff is already out there in the world through the show, through the podcast, through social media. There's certainly a lot out there in the world that maybe some of you are aware of. So that's a long-winded way of saying I'm excited to actually ask or hear some specifics from y'all as well. So I'll share this screen. I've got a few simple slides that will help direct this conversation. If for some reason you can't see things, please someone holler in and yell at me. But give me 1 second here. I will get this up and running. All right. Can anybody see that?
We have it. There we go, Mark. Yep, it's up.
There we go. All right. So as we've all alluded to, what I want to speak to you about is the Back 40 project. The Back 40 project is something that I came up with as an idea and then pitched to my team at MeatEater a little over 2 years ago. And it came about as me just being a person who has always been fascinated with the idea of someday owning a piece of ground. And it was a dream, something that seemed far off though, as something that would happen someday down the road. But I thought, man, if ever we could put together a story that could document everything that goes into that process, down to the nitty gritty details, that's the kind of thing that past me really could have used when I was trying to someday do that. I wish that I could follow along with someone's ups and downs and all the good and the bad that goes into trying to find a small property to buy someday, trying to figure out, what matters, what doesn't matter, what's a good piece, what's a bad piece. And then once you actually purchase something, how do you get started? How do you go through all those things? And a lot of what you see on TV and in magazines, it's pretty glamorous. It's always perfect. It always seems to be 2,000 acres of the most amazing thing you've ever seen. And while that sounded great and it was a lot of fun to watch, I never really saw myself in that. That didn't seem like something that was attainable or possible for me. So the idea here was, let's share the story of what it might actually look like for somebody like me. So the idea was to try to find and purchase a small piece of ground in Michigan and then document the entire story of how we were going to try to transform that small raw piece of ground into something really special. And the first thing I imagined I wanted to do was turn this thing into a whitetail paradise, because I'm a whitetail nut. I love this stuff. And when I pitched that to the folks that work at MeatEater with me, I got a quick email. I think it was an email. I think it was a quick email back from one of my bosses, Steve Ranella. And he said, yeah, that sounds great, but you got to get bees. And that was one of those things that I wasn't expecting that. And that definitely was not in my original plans for what I would be thinking of doing right away when it came to working on a piece of ground. I would not have originally thought that the key to whitetail paradise would be bees. But that was, or that should have been, a clue as to how different this experience would be. Because once we started working through this whole idea, we decided that we should look at, can you take a piece of property like this and can you turn it into a great hunting paradise? Can you turn it into a place where you can achieve your deer hunting goals and whatnot? But could you also do that with a wider perspective? Could you also do that by looking at the bigger picture outside of just deer? What if we also looked at the native plant life? What if we also tried to learn about the native plant life and improve that? What if we also tried to look at all the other wildlife on a piece of property that impacts your deer and everything around it? How about birds, bees, bugs, all the small mammals? All these things are interconnected, but we oftentimes give them the short straw, I suppose. Deer are what a lot of us are really passionate about. It's very easy to get tunnel vision on that. But I was challenged to look at everything around that. because deer do not exist in a vacuum. So that's what we set out to do, was could we look at this big picture? Could we try to improve this and transform this place into not just a deer hunting paradise, but also a wildlife paradise for everything from A to Z? And then finally, could we do all that? Could we learn about all these things? Could we share all these things both, digitally through the content we're going to produce? We're producing a TV show and podcasts and articles and everything like that. But could we then also share this actual physical landscape with other people? This goes back to that occasional tunnel vision that, at least I can speak for myself, that I sometimes get when it comes to deer. I can get really focused on, got to get my buck. I got this one deer I really want to get, and all my time and energy and focus dives into that. And it's really easy to get sucked into that and then forget about everybody else. And so when we set out on this journey, once again, I wanted to challenge myself, and the greater team wanted to look at, could you do all these things and also bring out other people? Can you share this place with guests, with family, with friends? Can you share it with new hunters? Can we not only share these experiences through content, but actually on the ground, bring new hunters out here and make this place work for everybody? That's what we were tasked with doing. That was the challenge that we faced. That was the goal we had for the Back 40 project, and that we've went about documenting now for the past 2 years. The show just wrapped up. Our second season, just the final episode came out this past Sunday. It's all on the MeatEater YouTube channel. So if you've seen that, you know the highs and lows and the main talking points about what happened. But I figure we can walk through a couple of my key takeaways throughout this process. And as I mentioned, I want to talk through some high level things here to at least, spark some ideas from everybody. And then wherever you want to dive further in, we could do that. So probably the most, or at least the lesson that we need to start with, was the importance of the very first step. When I set out on this project, the first thing ahead of me was actually finding a piece of ground. And I always imagined that, if ever I had the means to get a piece of property, it was something I've always dreamed of. So I always imagined that once I had the means to do it, from there, it's really easy, right? I mean, once you can do it, the hard part is just getting the means to buy a piece of ground. And once you have it, there's got to be amazing deer hunting properties all over the country. I can just snap my fingers and we're going to get a great place. And I'm going to be swimming in big bucks and sheds all over the place. And it's going to be fun and good times. And, your dreams are going to come true. What I found out, though, was that actually there's a whole lot of work in between having the means to purchase a property and then even just finding one that fits your goals. It was surprisingly challenging to find something that fit what we were trying to do. And so this was something that was impressed upon me by a lot of different people that I spoke to at this point in the process too. I sought out counsel from different people throughout the entire 2 years that we've been working on this, but in that front end was asking folks, hey, I've got a certain set of ideas that I think I should be paying attention to when I'm trying to find a piece of ground like this. There were certain criteria I had in mind that I thought could lead to a good deer hunting property and a good property for all these other things. But I wanted to get some other opinions. And what everyone, if there was one thing that was consistent across the board, it was don't skimp on this part. Because it's easy to want to jump to, well, where am I going to plant food plots? And where am I going to hang tree stands? And where am I going to plant trees? And how do I do this? And how do I do that? There's all the fun things we read about in the magazines that we see on TV that we want to do that stuff. That's what I wanted to do. But all of those things, you can get a do-over with. If I planted food plots and totally screwed it up in year one, I could try all over again in year two and we could right that wrong. When it comes to picking the right piece of ground, you break it, you buy it. There was no second go around with this. So we wanted to take our time, be really careful about the criteria we were looking at when trying to find the right property, and then making sure it was going to fit the unique goals that we had and the unique circumstances we were in and that anybody would be in. And a lot of that was revolved around the fact that this was a small property that we were going to purchase. We were looking for something in that 40 to 60-ish acre range, was something that could fall within our price point of what we could afford and what also would fit into the story we were trying to explore around what's possible for your average person. And we searched and searched. I think I probably looked at nearly 100 different properties online, and I went and walked 14 different properties in person before I finally found the piece that we settled on. And it, interestingly, through all that time and all those places I researched, the property I ended up settling on was not one I found. I found it by accident. This property had three of the very most important piece of criteria that I was looking for in its favor. And I think you should be able to see a map of that property now on your screens. So I want to walk you through what those three simple things were. And these three simple things, I believe, set us up for some of the quick short-term successes we've seen. All the work that you do, all the projects you put in place, all the smart decisions or whatever it might be, I think none of that a lot of that wouldn't be possible if you made the wrong decision on the front end. By making the right decision on the front end, all of your future work can be compounded because of the power of what's already on your property and what's surrounding your property. So here with my cursor, you can see the outline of the property. I like to tell people it looks a little bit like the state of Oklahoma. You've got this short panhandle region here to the west, and then it drops down into the pot, kind of, if you imagine this being a saucepan or a pot, drops down here. So as far as the three most important things I was looking for when purchasing the property, number one, we needed security cover, especially in a heavily pressured hunting area like southern Michigan. I've at least found that if I want to have the opportunity to see and target mature bucks, I need a place where these deer can make it through gun season and get a couple of years on them. So for me, I'm always looking for some kind of sanctuary. Maybe that's a swamp, like what we had here in this property. Maybe it's a neighboring property where hunting is not allowed, or some other thick, nasty cover, something that's going to allow deer to get some age. This property had that. The second thing I was looking for, and that I think is important in many cases on a small property, is diversity. Deer crave diversity. Deer and most wildlife crave edge. Like they want transitions and changes between habitat types. If you have some of that to start, that's a good thing. So this property had that swamp, as I mentioned, which is a great piece. It also had a really neat system here along this ridge that had scattered cedars and native grasses and a bunch of neat looking, very different little habitat type in this region here that we eventually came to know as the honey hole. And then finally it had 6 old fallow fields that used to be farmed and that had become overgrown with various weeds when I was looking at it for the first time. So I knew I'd have a lot of different things to work with here. We had that core cover, but then we had 6 old fields that were kind of a blank canvas for us to do whatever it was that we wanted to. Finally, though, and probably most importantly with a small property, we had a good neighborhood. And when you have a small property, the deer, the turkeys, the critters spend time on your property, do not spend time just on your property. They're all over the place. And so I wanted to make sure that when picking this location, that I was going to make sure it was in an area that connected into other quality habitat and that also connected in with other landowners that had similar management ideas and goals. So I did some internet sleuthing. I talked to friends of friends of friends, and I found out that some of these different landowners around us also manage for wildlife. Some of these other folks also manage their habitat. So there are things that, again, would give us those compounding effects. So if I could do a few things right here on our piece, that would add to and benefit from what other people were doing here on the neighboring properties. We have this large wetland system that extends to our southwest and above to our northwest. Lots of good habitat, and we are kind of right in the middle of it. High level importance of making that right choice. This is the piece we ended up leaning on or deciding on, and that set us into last year when now we have the back 40, and the question is, what are you going to do with it? And I get this question a lot from folks. People constantly are asking, what's the first thing you should do to improve a property? Where do you start? And there's no one size fits all answer to that because everyone has a different situation. But what I've found and what I've learned from the, many different whitetail habitat consultants and folks like those on the call here today, those people taught me that one of the most important things you should do is, find out what you're missing. What's the weakness? What's the missing link? Deer need just a few things. Most wildlife need just a few things. They need food and water. They need cover, and they need a sense of security. And so if you can identify what's missing in your area, whether that's on your core piece of property or in your neighborhood, if you can identify that missing link and then provide it, that's usually a great place to start. Sometimes some properties it's going to be, if you're in an area of big woods and there's lots and lots of cover but no food, well, then there you go. Start with food. In our case, it wasn't that we were missing any one thing. It was that we had some things in one location, everything in one location, while another location had nothing. So by that, I mean, we had great habitat and a lot of wildlife value in our swamp, but then we had these 6 old fields on either side that provided what I came to find last year was very, very little value to anything out there. Those 6 old fields were overgrown in an invasive species, an invasive weed called mare's tail. And it provides almost zero wildlife cover value, almost zero food value. And so we basically had wildlife deserts across half of our property. And as you might guess, that led to not a lot of activity in half the farm. So you had one big chunk of cover where there was action, and the rest of the property was wasteland. So that was where we had to start. Year 1 was about learning this stuff, identifying these things, bringing in a lot of different folks, different people that can give us new ideas, give us a perspective. We tried a few things that first year that didn't go terribly well. It was a tough hunting season. I did end up having some success, but overall it was pretty slow. So in 2020, the question then was, all right, what are you going to do about it? We identified our weakness. The weakness was these 6 old fields. So what can you do about that? And what we started doing was addressing the goal of getting almost a complete transformation of those old fields. And I'll walk you through quickly what we did. First thing in the spring, we applied a pre-emergent herbicide treatment that would knock out as much of that mare's tail as we possibly could. So I wanted to kill a lot of those weeds early on so that other things could grow up. Some things that we would plant and other things that were just naturally already in the seed bank that would come back and hopefully would have new, diverse, native plant life coming back, and that kind of stuff that deer and turkeys and birds and bees and butterflies could benefit from. Also at that time period, I frost-seeded switchgrass across a lot of these fields, which was going to eventually provide a base of cover that would last all year round, give us some permanent structure out there. We also, thinking about pollinators and bees and butterflies and those different services that those critters provide, we wanted to plant a variety of different native wildflowers to try to provide for that side of things. Moving on, and later in May, I think it was, we planted strips of sorghum. So these were 30-foot wide, 14-foot tall walls of green vegetation that kind of looks like standing corn, but we were able to plant these walls throughout these old fields. So instead of having a 10-acre wide open field, we now had that broken up into little compartments so that deer or turkeys or even us humans, we could walk across or walk into these fields. And instead of being seen from 300 yards away, now you can only be seen from 30 yards away. So we provided that visual cover that would make something like a mature buck feel a lot more comfortable walking out there, and also encourage more travel throughout. As you can see here in this image, we also planted food plots. Food was something that was missing in those fields, missing in the neighboring properties. So that was something that, of course, any deer manager worth their salt wants to try at least. And so we did that. And the first year we put in a little over an acre. The second year we more than 3x that. So somewhere around 3.5 acres of food plots were planted. We try to do this in a no-till way. So we use a no-till drill to get that seed in the ground, trying to learn about that, learning about the importance of preserving our soil quality. That was something that we dove into in this project as well. So we planted a blend of clovers and oats and wheat and brassicas and a whole slew of different things that would provide year-round attraction. We also planted trees. We planted more than 50 evergreen trees across these fields. And the idea here was to provide pockets, again, of structure, because we really wanted to add, we talked about food, want to add cover, and we want to add diversity. So I took a look at, adding these pockets of 4 or 5 evergreen trees scattered around these fields that, will kind of serve like a downed tree in the middle of the lake. If you put a evergreen tree a Christmas tree in the middle of a pond that has nothing else in there, every largemouth bass is going to flock to that. The idea here was to do something similar with these fields, provide these destinations that, you know, deer will eventually bed around, they'll eventually rub on these trees. There's a reason for wildlife now to visit these small destinations throughout. So the end result of all of that by the end of August 2020 was that we had a very different habitat type. Instead of a monoculture of 30 some acres of mare's tail, we now had almost 4 acres of food plots. We had all these strips of sorghum. We had a very diverse base of cover, of grasses, of flowers, of other native shrubs and plants. And that translated into a totally different wildlife experience. We didn't have a single buck on trail camera in the summer of 2019. We had dozens in the summer of 2020. We only had one buck in 2019 that we thought maybe was 4 or older. We had probably, I don't know, 4 maybe that were that old or older this year, plus maybe 8 or 9 that were 3 or older, at least 10 that were 2 or older. I'm not saying all these deer lived on it all the time, but we saw a very noticeable uptick in deer activity and wildlife activity of all sorts. These fields were pretty desolate last year. This year we had doves everywhere. We had birds everywhere. We saw more turkeys than ever. It just seemed like the place came to life. And some of that, of course, could be some luck. Some of that could be the fact that we picked an area that had the potential for a quick turn because we tried to find that right neighborhood. But I do think some of our work did pay off and help. And at a high level, those are the things that stood out to me the most. So we identified that weak spot, which for us was those old fields, and then went to work on them. Now, the third really was driven home for me, and I'll try to move this along because I'm getting way too long-winded here, is that, you know, one of those goals in the front end was, could we be multi-purpose? Could we share this place with other people? Could we do different things on the property? Could we manage just not for deer, but also other critters? And what I learned, to make a Mark Kenyon long story short, is that yes, we could. The temptation for me would have been to hoard this place to myself and do nothing but target mature bucks on it and just hunt it myself really carefully. But we didn't do that. We had Steve and some of my other friends out to turkey hunt just a couple weeks before opening day. We had 12 guest hunters come out and hunt the place with us, including 2 brand new hunters. We had a lot of commotion out there. We had a lot of different things going on. And what we found is that we could do those things. We could squirrel hunt. We could bring a lot of different people out. We could introduce new hunters, and we could still have good deer hunting. Not only that, but we could also focus on these other goals like native plant life and still have good deer hunting. For example, we discovered a rare native prairie pocket in a part of our property where there were some species that were all across Michigan 200, 300 years ago, but are now almost all gone because of development and farming and whatnot. And this was in an area that was also a really neat place from a deer hunting perspective. Cedars and thick brushy brambles and stuff and these tall grasses. And an ecologist that we had come out said, hey, you should remove all this other stuff. Remove the cedars, remove the brambles, remove the autumn olive, and restore the prairie. And so that would have been the right thing just for native plant life. On the flip side, from a deer hunter's perspective, I'm thinking, man, that's all the good stuff that's keeping the deer here. So we decided to try to strike balance. And that was, let's remove some of that. Let's create more openings, but also keep some of it. So we tried to find a middle ground. We ran a prescribed fire through this area to rejuvenate that prairie. We removed some of those other species while keeping some of the cedars and cover in there that gave us that great deer hunting stuff. So could we have a multi-purpose property? Could we manage for different things and bring other people out there? Yeah, we could. And finally, I learned that all of this stuff is better with other people. Again, over the last 10, 15 years, I find myself so often focused on chasing that buck, and it becomes a solo endeavor. And this property forced me and reminded me and really illuminated to me just how much better it is when you do it that way. When you share with people you care about, when you meet new people, when you have all these experiences, sure, it can be fun on your own, but taking a friend out, taking a new hunter out, spreading the wealth, it's not only the right thing to do, but it's just enjoyable as hell. And that was what rang the truest for me throughout this whole thing. We brought a new hunter out this year named Dan, who I met at a QDMA or NDA Field to Fork event last year. And we wanted to continue his mentorship here on the back 40. Had him out in the summer, did some hunting, or excuse me, did some work on the trees, did some food plot work with him. We put him through the whole ringer, tried to show him what we were doing out here, and then eventually brought him back out to hunt this fall. Had a great time. And coming out of that process where I participated in this mentorship Field to Fork hunt last fall. We continued it this year. And he said something to me that struck me. He has no other family or friends that are into this kind of stuff. And so when he got this interest in deer hunting, he had to seek everything out on his own. And he, had to start hunting where he could, which was public land. And he went out and he's been trying on his own and working really hard, trying to figure this stuff out. And he's getting it. He's really getting it. But the first day we were out hunting together on the back 40, I think it was the first day we saw, 4 deer. And I was apologizing to him for how lousy the hunting had been. Man, this is a bummer. We've hardly seen anything. And he was like smiling ear to ear. And he said, this is more deer than I've seen the entire year. I've never seen this many deer in my life. He was thrilled. And what really hit home for me there was just how much people need places like this, places like the back 40, where you have an opportunity to see a healthy ecosystem and to see wildlife and to have someone there alongside you to help bring you along as a new hunter. I was really lucky to have a dad and grandpa and family members that did those things for me, but not everybody is. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so you can see me. And so all of that is to say that we identified a need. We saw that there's a whole lot of folks out there like Dan who could use a place like this to help them along too. And the work that folks like everyone here at the NDA are doing with the Field to Fork program in developing a system to help people seemed to be a great program for doing that, in need of more places where they could actually bring people to. So what we've decided to do is we are going to give the back 40 property to the National Deer Association as a location where they can teach people, where they can take people, where they can show folks like we try to do with Dan, what this stuff's all about. Walk them through learning about native plant life, learning about cover and food and neighborhoods and deer and rubs and scrapes and how much fun it is to sit in a tree and chase these critters and how to go through the whole thing. And we're excited to be able to support that moving forward and hopefully be part of some of those mentorship activities. And I'm just thrilled that the mission that we set out for with the back 40 is going to continue for years to come through the stewardship and support of the National Deer Association. So I went way longer than I was supposed to. I told you guys I was going to be short, and instead I talked. So sorry about that. But I'd love to answer any questions if you guys have them. And I'm also happy to stay on a little bit later if Kip will allow it. I know he's a stickler when it comes to timing, but I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can since I let my mouth run there.
Oh man, Mark, there's no need to apologize at all. That was absolutely awesome. And we cannot thank you enough for that big announcement at the end and donating that to the National Deer Association for continued work like that and be able to share that with others. So a huge round of applause, for you for speaking tonight and for that. There's a lot more that will come with that, but that is awfully awesome. So thank you very much. So
You're welcome.
Folks, you can put in the chat box your questions, send them in. Matt and I will go through these. Matt, you know what? I had a few that were emailed to me tonight before we got started here. So I will ask the first one from an email, and then we can start going through some of the ones on the list here as well. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Did you catch your breath, Mark? Things good from your end now?
Yeah, I'm getting
all right. Very
rehydrated.
Good. Here we go then. First question that says, this is in reference to the back 40. Do you think the same property improvement methods used there could be applied to a hill country property?
I think it comes down to that lesson I mentioned, that being identifying what your weak spots are, what your property has and what it does not have. So in our case, probably the most, no question, the most impactful work was what we did to those fields. In a hill country scenario, that certainly could be an area of weakness. Maybe you do need to add cover and add food, but at the same time, there's lots of places in hill country that maybe are big timber, and your way of adding cover might not be by planting something, but by cutting down something. Maybe you're making some type of timber stand improvement project, or hinge cutting, or burning through a timbered patch. There's a lot of different question marks there, but certainly some of those things we did could be applied in any scenario: hill country, farm country, the south, the north, relatively applicable across the board.
I'll take the next one, Mark. Again, to echo what Kep said, we're humbled from the gift from MeatEater Inc. and your vision of the whole thing. We're gonna not let you down and make sure it kind of holds true. And that actually blends into the next question. I'm gonna do a two-parter. Dave Jackson asked, why Michigan? And I think I know the answer to that. That should be easy. The second one is Danny Miller, a little while later, asked, is the gifting to NDA going to sustain what you're building for the long term? For example, conservation easements, et cetera. Are there plans to collaborate with neighbors, et cetera? So I know we have had that conversation going back to when you first brought the idea to our staff, but I'll let you answer those two questions. Why Michigan, and are we going to carry out the vision? I can say yes, but why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so why Michigan is because I was going to be the steward of this project and the one running it, and I simply needed something in my wheelhouse that I could access, because I can tell you I had to spend a whole lot of hours out there. And so it had to be within easy enough driving distance for me, which is why Michigan. As far as moving forward, that was a big part of this decision for us, was that we really did want the mission to continue. We didn't want to buy this place. Excuse me. The downfall of drinking beer and is not the hiccups. We didn't want
never a downfall.
Yeah. We didn't want to start this project and try to begin something really beneficial for this area, and then just sell it off to someone who's going to turn it into an apartment complex. So from the get-go, we knew we needed to have a plan in place where we could keep this mission moving forward. And early on, I thought, I don't know of anybody else that would be better suited to do that than you guys, both because of the organization's skill set and experience within deer and wildlife management, but then also because of just this tremendous system you've built for managing hunter recruitment through the Field to Fork program. It just seemed to be such a natural fit. So, as you alluded to, Matt, we started having conversations a long time ago about, hey, if we do this, if we donate this property to the organization, can you guys do this? Are you interested in continue doing these things? Can we make sure that this property, is conserved and cared for and stewarded moving forward in the coming years? And that's something that, we talked through a lot and explored lots of ideas, and we have a plan to do that now. And I'm just thrilled that, you guys were able to be able to do that. And I was going to say I couldn't imagine a better ending if I wrote it, but I guess you could say I did write it. We kind of did write the whole Back 40 story. I spent a lot of time, but I'm really happy that it's worked out this way, and excited for what you guys are going to be able to do with it moving forward. And also, selfishly, a lot of people have asked me, like, isn't it going to be disappointing to have to give away the farm and not be able to reap, the benefits or reap the rewards of all the work you put in? And knowing now, that we're able to give it to you guys, I'm excited that I can still be a part of it. I can still help out. I can still see what's going on. Hopefully going to be able to be out there and help some new hunters and see them benefiting from all this stuff. And that's going to be an awesome feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't a reach for sure. I mean, we're known for our deer and land management expertise and have for over 30 years. But for those that have been members a long time, our initiatives with opening access and getting new hunters out there, I see a lot of faces and names on here that have been the benefit of that. That's kind of been a transition for us, and that's vitally important as well. So thank you, Mark. Yeah, it was an easy conversation to have, and we were proud to have it. Kip, you want to ask the next one?
Yeah, and we, of course, you are welcome anytime there, Mark, and we hope you will come back there. And your wife is probably happy too. You won't have to make quite so many trips there now, as is in the past. So, hey, Augusto wants to know how important was working with your neighbors to the success that you've had on the back 40?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the beginning, it was just understanding who some of the neighbors were in the beginning gave me the confidence to move forward with this. And I found out through a handful of different ways that there was a number of people in the area that had some similar sensibilities, I guess, about what we were trying to do. Excuse me. And then as far as working together, while we haven't worked directly with neighbors, we've certainly opened up a lot of communication channels, which has been great. So I've gotten to know via text message and Instagram messages and things like that, I don't know, 3 or 4 different sets of neighbors, which is just a great thing to have. We're sharing trail camera pictures. We're discussing some like, what are you seeing? How are things going? I passed on this buck. Did you see him? And that's great for camaraderie. It's great just to know that, hey, if you shoot a deer, feel free to come track them on mine. Just having those open channels, being supportive of each other, congratulating each other when someone has success. That's good stuff. Now, if I were, if this is a 10-year thing or 20-year thing, I think then over the years, I'd have more opportunity to start syncing up with those neighbors and talk about other shared projects and things like that. And maybe you guys will be able to do that, because I think you're in a good neighborhood where people would be interested in that kind of thing. Just we had a pretty short time frame, and we're jam packed with a lot of stuff that's a little bit unique to us because we're trying to film a TV show too. But I certainly think it's a potential, and it's a good thing. If you're trying to do something like this, I would highly recommend trying to open those lines and work together.
Good deal.
Got a question here from Andrew. Andrew's in Maryland, West Virginia, hunts where CWD exists. I'm going to kind of sum up his question. Does he think, or do you think, Mark, that better deer management and mitigating the risk, does better deer management mitigate the risk of spread of CWD? And then the second part is more for us about contributing to organizations like NDA and the research going towards CWD. Is that going to help? So do you want to touch on CWD and your thoughts on managing land for deer? Can that actually help mitigate the spread? And I'm happy to jump off that when you're ready.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the all-knowing authority on that kind of stuff, but I can tell you that it's something we did think about. And a friend of mine, Doug Duran, deals with CWD in his neck of the woods in Wisconsin. And when he came out to visit the property and offered some thoughts, that's definitely something we talked about. And in my conversation with him, he's a staunch advocate for really being serious about dealing with CWD. And what we came out of those conversations with were a belief that, number one, we need to try to responsibly manage the deer population, especially when it comes to does, keeping that overall population at a reasonable level. As far as density of deer, that's going to help possibly slow the transmission a little bit. But really the very most important thing is monitoring what's going on. So getting your deer tested, participating in any kind of programs that are going on in the area, obviously following any state regulations. And so we were trying to do all those things. We're fortunate not to be in a CWD county, but we're in the general neck of the woods. So it was something we're keeping an eye on, getting our deer tested, and trying to stay up on, whatever the state deems necessary for us to do. We're absolutely going to do that.
Yeah, very good. I mean, in terms of managing the population and monitoring, that's absolutely true. Contributing to groups like ours, the National Deer Association, and the kind of stuff that we're doing, we have always supported better research with knowing more about CWD. We always are in touch with that. We have a resource center, CWD resource center, and actually have some projects going on right now where we're financially contributing to them from members like you all that are out there. Your membership dollars, the money you spend on things like the sweepstakes, go directly to that. And I don't want to take too much time away from the back 40 discussion, but we can certainly talk about that more. Reach out to Kip or myself. It's just kip@deerassociation.com or matt@deerassociation.com, and we'll happy to talk about that. So Kip, you want to do the next one?
Yeah, and I'll add with that one. I agree with Mark. It absolutely can help from a CWD, and if you're managing that deer, particularly from a density standpoint, and monitor, as Mark said. So heck yeah, you absolutely can make a big difference. So the worst thing we can do is do nothing as hunters, and hunters every day can make a difference. So absolutely. Michael wants to know with regard to a higher level of knowledge relative to deer behavior, at any given time, what literature or organizations should they seek out? This isn't for me. This isn't Matt or Kip, or this truly is for Michael.
Okay.
So, who should they seek out?
If you say so. Well, of course, I would recommend the National Deer Association. And I can say in all honesty, Matt alluded to this at the top end. Over a decade ago, or somewhere around a decade ago, I participated in that Deer Steward course, which was really an important thing for me in establishing a foundation of that next level of deer behavior, biology, management knowledge. I came into this as a hunter my whole life. But over the last 10, 15 years, I've been working really hard to take that to the next level. And the Quality Deer Management Association, which is now the National Deer Association, has been crucial in that. Terrific magazine you guys put out. Your whitetail reports are always amazing. The staff you guys have, I won't toot your horn anymore, but you get my 2 thumbs up. I'll tell you to check out the content we're producing as well at MeatEater and the Wired Hunt podcast. And then there are more resources today than ever before online. Amazing YouTube channels, podcasts, websites. There's a lot of stuff out there. What I would tell you though is, and maybe this isn't even the question because he was talking about deer behavior and stuff like that. I'm about to tell you some hunting related things. So I might be off on a detour here, but as important as it is to consume, to listen to the podcasts and watch the videos and read the magazines and the articles, there is no replacement for actually getting out there and experiencing these things. So read, listen, watch, study, do all those things. Absolutely. But just get out there and try these things and immerse yourself. You're going to learn a whole lot more in a couple of days of that than listening to me yap my jaw.
Good deal. And I agree. There's a tremendous amount, and you have helped, or you have added to that tremendously through your Wired Hunt podcast, through the Back 40 show, and other things, that your writings and other things you've done. So we appreciate the nod to us, and you are contributing with that every day as well. So thank you, Matt. You're up.
All right, let's see. We got a quick one here for you, Mark. Evan Beck asks, will there be any deed restrictions placed on the property in the gift?
Yeah, I guess I don't really think so. But I'm not a realtor and understanding all the specifics. But I don't think so. I'm not part of the legal process of putting everything together. But as I understand it, we're gifting it to you as is. And,
Yep.
You guys have, we've agreed on some plans as far as what we're going to do with it, or you guys are going to do with it.
Yep. And we're committed to hold it. I mean, it's not like we're turning this thing over. We're going to actually try to look into land protection options and some other things. I mean, our hope is to use this property and the platform it provides the National Deer Association to get more attention on deer hunting, on conservation, on introducing hunters, and working with Mark and others at MeatEater, hopefully to do that over a while. I mean, this is going to be a project that you're going to hear a lot about. It's not the end. Hopefully you guys gave us a new beginning of a story, and we're going to carry that story on. Kip,
Mark,
you're up.
Yeah, one more email that came in. This is from Stephen Ranella. He asked if your work tomorrow. No, this is from Steve, not Stephen Ranella. Steve wants to know a little bit of your thought process through the controlled burn. From your decision to go with it to that whole process. So talk a little bit about what you felt as the advantages of doing that.
Yeah, well, that was a really cool experience for me because while I've been able to dabble with food plotting in the past, and I've done some light timber type stand improvement stuff, I never was able to participate in a controlled burn until this. And it was something that honestly I was a little intimidated by to try on my own. So we had an ecologist from the NRCS here in Michigan that had come out and reviewed the property with us in 2019, the one who identified the fact that we had this native prairie that was really rare and special. And he saw the need to try to nurture that. And so Dan Zay's his name, he's actually in the chat. Dan was instrumental in helping out with that process and really put together an amazing burn plan and walked me through all the different things you need to be thinking about when planning a burn like this, considering wind direction and humidity and looping in the local fire department and all the different things that you need to be thinking about when figuring out how to do that safely. As far as the impact that it had, the goal was that by burning this native prairie, we would rejuvenate it. We would see it come in thicker, fuller, more diverse, expand, and see a flush new growth of that here in the next year. And by pairing that with some of the removal of those other brush species, tree species, we could expand the native prairie while also still preserving some of those neat features that we had in that section of the property that kept deer really, very comfortable in there. And so we did the burn. It was really interesting to see it. It was fun. It was not as intimidating as I thought it would be, but it's great to have a couple people there that were experienced. I would tell you now, having got to help a little bit, and mostly was watching Dan, and he had two other helpers there and doing some small, simple tasks along the way. I saw that if you have a good plan in place and someone experienced to kind of get you started, it's certainly within the realm of possibility for average people to do. And that was probably the most impactful. Is I was empowered to now do something like this myself in the future. It's not this crazy thing that you can only see done by professionals. If you do it smart and follow the right plan, I think we could all do something like that. And we saw tremendous growth. We saw that prairie come in really beautifully in 2020. It expanded, it was lush, and I ended up killing my buck right there this year. So it worked out really nicely in all ways.
Very cool. Very cool. Brandon asked, can we help with the back 40 off-season management somehow? I'll tell you, I'll answer that, and I'll give you another one, Mark. Our plan is to engage with volunteers and grassroots NDA members in Michigan. So there will be opportunity there. Mark, let's see. There's another Brandon. I'd love to hear more about how the switchgrass turned out and what you did with it. So talk a little bit about your experiences with the switchgrass.
Yeah, so the switchgrass is something that, from everything I understand, and I guess I want to take one small step back, that I think people that followed the project and follow me in the podcast, they know this, but if you're jumping in late, I came to this as someone with a lot of interest in learning about it, but not a ton of experience in having done these things myself. So as I mentioned, I dabbled in land management. I've done a few things on by permission properties, but a lot of this was new to me too. So I'm taking things I've learned about as the host of a podcast, or things I've listened to people from the NDA talk about, and was trying to put this stuff into practice. So one of those things was the switchgrass. Never done that before, but what I had been told and what I'd been reminded was that switchgrass is a kind of a slow moving project. It's going to take a while for it to become established. So year one, the first step was applying that herbicide treatment to knock out the competing vegetation on the front end. And then we frost seeded it. And then, what the result was coming out of that was that we had a base of switchgrass in a lot of places, but certainly a lot of other competing vegetation. So in some areas of the property, we've got a nice, relatively short stand of switchgrass mixed in with a lot of other stuff. But if you looked at it simply from like, oh, how well did your switchgrass do? And how much of a value did that provide? If that's all that you looked at, you would say, it was okay. But what really came out of it, and this was a little bit of a surprise, I hadn't thought about this, was that by applying that herbicide treatment, by knocking out the mare's tail, it would open things up for everything else that naturally wanted to be there. So we got the switchgrass, but then we got a lot of other things that ended up being really good too. So the fields became much more diverse. We had a lot of different height structure. We had some really thick areas, some open pockets. We had goldenrod. We had, I can't even think of all the different things, all sorts of different types of grasses, the switchgrass, stuff that I don't know the name of. I'm out there with a little app taking pictures and stuff, saying, what's this? I've never seen this before. What's this? This wasn't here last year. So it became just a jungle of different types of plant life. And, moving forward, as I understand it, going into the next year, if you want to continue working with that switchgrass, you would apply a different herbicide treatment or do some different things next year to try to knock back competing vegetation and allow that switchgrass to come back in places more fully, more thick. That's going to be on you guys to decide how and what you want to do with that. But there's a foundation there now that you guys can work with if you want to.
Yeah, and you guys did remove that carpet of that monoculture of invasives, and you can see the diversity in some of that drone footage in the old field area.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. I mean, a lot of those dark browns and other colors that you can see. It's amazing. So
Yeah.
thank you, Kip.
Yeah.
You're up.
Mark, we have a lot of questions here. We're
We
never going to
do.
make them through all of these, but let's at least do a couple more if you're game, and then we can wrap it up after that. But let's do. Luke wants to know. He said, great job. Relative to the size of the property, he says, what is the smallest amount of acreage you would look at to be doing some of the work like you did here? Could a guy take 15 to 20 acres, in your opinion, and make it viable for what you were doing?
Well, I think you could certainly, without a doubt, any size property, you could make some kind of difference. You could improve it to some degree and see positive results. But I think that the biggest thing that has to adjust from 10 acres to 64 acres to 120 acres, whatever it is your expectations. What are your expectations and goals going to be? If this is 15 acres, I'm gonna have a different set of goals and expectations than if it's 64 and if it's 200. So on 15, you can certainly add some things that can help you have deer pass through more often and spend a little more time. And if you've got the absolute right 15 acres, maybe you can make a really big difference. But at the same time, that's a very small sliver of a deer's home range. So that's the biggest thing is whether you've got 5 or 50, do something if you're excited and interested in doing that, because you can make a positive difference. I would just caution you to, be realistic about it as well. And look at this as, if you are excited about and can enjoy the process, absolutely this is going to be a win. But don't get too pinned down by the end results in some kind of arbitrary, got to kill this big buck on this property for me to be happy with the 15 acres that I bought, if that's what you're trying to do in this case. But I would absolutely encourage anyone to try something, to do something, because most of the time it's the work itself that's the most fun. It's the project and seeing what can we do here and what kind of positive difference, and can we see more turkeys next year, and can we see more deer next year, and all that stuff coming together and putting in the time and effort makes it. Just the act of doing it is really what it's all about. So go into it with the right expectations and enjoy that, and go for it on whatever size property you have.
Mark, there's a ton of questions here. We're gonna have to send some of them to you, but I gotta ask this one. There's actually a comment and a question coming from Kara. Kara says her comment first: as a non-hunter, I appreciate all you do and want to say thanks for producing content that is accessible to people like me. And then the question coming from Kara is, while I may never pull the trigger on a deer myself, I respect all you do. Are there any other resources you suggest for people like me so that we can continue to share in your experiences and support the hunters that we love? It's a good question.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Kara, for wanting to learn more about what we're doing here. And I think that what isn't always evident from the outside, but from within this community, I think we all experience it, is that there's a deep love and appreciation for the animals that we pursue and for the landscapes that we spend time in. And so I'm glad that, you've been able to connect with that and see some of that through our work. As far as the question, I'm not sure if the question was if you wanted to know what some recommended resources were for just like seeing more of this kind of stuff. I would tell you, I would plug, something like the MeatEater television show is a great place to learn more about how hunting and conservation and acquiring sustainable food and all those things intertwine. That's a great place to learn more about this kind of thing. And then stay tuned for some things we've got in the works for Wired to Hunt. This is something we plan on spending a lot more time on, and we want to speak to people like you and encourage you and your friends to learn more about what we've got going on. And if you ever were intrigued to get involved and try your hand at something like this, we want to be here to help.
I'll
Mark, we
echo
will
that.
make sure that we get you a list of all this, because even you're not going to know how to contact some of these people that have asked questions, but there's a lot of really nice comments in there relative to you and thanking you for different things. So we'll make sure you get a copy of all of this, but
Great.
very, very well done. So thank you, my friend, for being here tonight and sharing some of your experiences and expertise with us. This was really cool. So great job on your part.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna ask you questions, so don't leave quite yet, so you can type in the answer. Quick plug for our organization. If you're not a member of the National Deer Association, I see again a lot of familiar names, but some that are unfamiliar. If you're not a member, please join and become a member and support us and all that we do. The time has actually come and gone for that sweepstakes that was going, so that's closed, but we'll have another one launching next week. Kip, you want to talk a little bit about upcoming webinars?
Yeah, so if you enjoyed this tonight, we hope you will join us every month for, remember, that second Monday. So our next one is early January there. And actually, I will be the speaker next month. We will be publishing our 13th annual, we used to call them whitetail reports. Beginning this year, we have changed the name to a deer report. But, it's looking at the hunting trends, the harvest trends, national management programs across whitetails, as well as a few other species we're going to add in there this year, that range that comes out every January. So our webinar for January is going to be a state of the deer report. So we can take a look at exactly what is happening, and it'll be hot off the press. So attendees at that webinar will be some of the first ones that get to see that data, Matt, and have access to it. So you're going to be on your own co-hosting next week. So I hope that you can handle the duties. We won't be here to play off each other, but I'm quite confident that you have a good grasp of what's going on here. And next time, given that I will be talking, I don't want to hear any of that, the boring part of the next person coming up like you gave Nick tonight. So he's the big boss, but I still do go over your annual review. So, but yes, next month it'll be me, Matt.
I don't know how I'm going to co-host by myself, but we'll figure that out. I know I got you guys rolling. All right. So question, I every time we do one of these, I write down a bunch of different tips or facts, depending on the speaker. You'd think I'd do something management related. What plant he planted on the back 40 to do for security cover, how many acres of food plots did they do? But I actually have a little bit more of an obscure number. How many properties did Mark physically walk before they picked? Oh boy, everybody. Let's see. We got before they actually picked one out. The first one is Benjamin Smith. Got it first. So Benjamin Smith, email me at matt@deerassociation.com, and I will make sure your copy of That Wild Country by Mark Kenyon will be mailed to you. So thank you, everybody. Kip, any final words?
Just another thank you to Mark and to everybody for joining us here tonight. We hope you enjoyed what you heard from the organization. We want to make sure that you get to hear, what the most latest things that the National Deer Association is doing and accomplishing. So that's why we start every one of these with that. So if you remember, thank you. I hope you're proud of where we're headed. And then just a big thank you to Mark for being here tonight, for what he does for deer and hunters in general, and non-hunters, making them appreciate, wild food and wild places. And of course, the big donation to us. So hats off to you, Mark. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. And thank you to Steve and others at MeatEater for the gift.
Our pleasure. Keep on keeping on, guys. Do good work.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you and happy holidays.
Be safe, everybody. Good night.